Welcome to Orthodox Christian Theology. This is Craig Truglia, and with me today is the man, the legend, the other Paul. How you doing today?
What is up, man? I'm doing fantastic. It is now 7:07 a.m. A nice crisp morning in Australia, and I'm loving it. It's awesome to be back. It's been ages, mate.
Now, are you in the mountains in Australia? Because I'm hearing a wicked echo there.
No, okay, no. That's unfortunately my room. Because I had my personal library here, which made it not as bad. But so people just had to get used to that. But I had to move it down elsewhere, so now it's mostly empty.
There we go. So you've given up on reading books like many from your generation. And that's what we're kind of talking about today is the generational divide when it comes to reaching people the gospel, with bringing people into church, and what I found to be an unintentionally hilarious Reddit thread by the ELCA. Um, and they were essentially asking, well, how do we get more people to go to our, mainline church? And all the advice they got was pretty much bad, which shows you just how out of touch they are. So today we'll be talking about what keeps, we need to be in touch, right?
Yeah.
Hear from the Zoomer there, hear from the millennial here. Anyone apparently under 50 is in this big black box they don't know how to get into. So we'll get into that in a second. But also not only how to be in touch, but like, why are people drawn to trad Anglicanism? Why are people drawn to orthodoxy? What is drawing people to these things, and kind of flesh that out. And we have God bless Christos Anesti, Aletheos Anesti. So we have that. And
Thank you, Static.
we will have some fun in this show. But before we get started, I want everyone to stop, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and please consider supporting the missionary work in Cambodia, orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. Links to support the mission financially below. If you're like, oh, I don't want Craig taking my money. Well, you know what? Let's take your soul. How about you become a missionary? You could sign up to become a missionary at orthomission.com, Prophet Daniel Missionary Movement. So get involved with missions. We also have below the Other Paul's channel that you can subscribe to. So subscribe to the other Paul, check out his content. What are you working on lately, Paul, that you feel sets you apart from the apologetics works? Let me tell you, I've actually like almost entirely disconnected. It's all boring me. It's a bunch of, it's not heterosexual drama, so you could put the inverse in what it is. And so what are you doing that's different?
Well, I'm both different and not different, in that on the one hand, I do still engage in the apologetic sphere. But of course, mate, you should see something about Mr. Buscus, or get on the Buscus. Tobuscus, is that a reference to that? But you got to see our streams back in the day. We've done plenty, God willing more. But anyway, to not get distracted, I still engage in those circles, even with the very muddy side of it. And actually, it's a very deliberate course change I've made recently, where I deliberately am trying to get into the mud with what's commonly called the ortho bros, who I do make sure to distinguish from other high tier Eastern Orthodox thinkers, and even just from Eastern Orthodoxy in general.
So who are you arguing with? Because I don't even know.
Oh, all of them. Jay Dyer, Alex Soren, Cleave to Antiquity, Ben Michael, the lot, basically. All those guys in that crowd who want to engage, I get with them. And I do it specifically because I have the same frustration you do with much of the scene, where it's not just with them, but it's also elsewhere in other denominations, although I'd say, frankly, to a lesser degree, where the punch, the adrenaline, and the rhetoric is valued far above the actual substance. And I see that as being spiritually deadly, because people are won over by that stuff. And so I've tried to enter that sphere on their own terms, with aggression, with wit and all that, but not in a way to deceive people, but to actually give them the substance of what they need to think on these issues. So I'm doing that. And at the same time, I'm working on more and more with frequency and efficiency, and actually producing them high quality, positive oriented works like my Patrology series, which I just dropped the first video for that a couple of weeks ago, and that's basically just covering any questions on the church fathers that for one, that my supporters actually vote on out of a list. And I just do a very academic level deep dive into that topic. That first one was the ecclesiology
on what you were commenting on, which is the state of apologetics. I think this has been worsened, especially since the election, and there's been a real hardening among like X being kind of the successor to Facebook for a lot of these conversations. And not just the algorithm, but the format with the length of posts. It kind of just lends itself to very terse exchanges, and it feeds into what already was, I think, the bad part of apologetics to begin with. I think very few people, I think Father John Whiteford's a good example of someone that could have some wit, but also could kind of keep his cool and not take things very personally. But I think some people like that are very few and far between. I haven't followed what you've done. All of our exchanges have been positive. So I trust that these conversations, though witty, are positive. But I do think that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that you try to swim against the current to think you're making a difference. The current may take you away. And so I think everyone needs to be mindful of this, because that's a real problem in apologetics. The second big problem is your Patrology series, because your Patrology series is written from Anglican viewpoint. Anglicans are wrong. Am I right?
So the Photians do say. I just missed them for that. But no, I'm very deliberate with that series, where I try to actually do it just from as rigorously academic an angle as possible. Like if I see, here's where it is. The Anglican bias doesn't come in the analysis, I submit. It comes in the selection process. So if I see that, I give a prescribed list of patristic topics I'm willing to do to my supporters, and then they vote from that list. And I'll be straight up. I typically list those issues where I believe I could get like the most, hey, there's a father that agrees with us on this issue. Not exclusively. Like, for example, the next one coming up, which my supporters voted on, is the marology of Augustine. So that's the one I'm working on now. And I do genuinely believe, from what I've read, on the one hand, he's not totally Anglican. He believes he certainly has a degree of Marian piety that's higher than many Anglicans, but it's also not as much as like Rome or the East, I submit, for example. But also there's views of his where we could say, hey, look, he doesn't have the full Roman dogma. So that's always a nice point. But if and when I do encounter, out of my own personal interest, a father on an issue that just like from a consistent, principled reading does not support an Anglican view or opposes one, I'm just honest with that, because in my personal philosophy and just really how things should happen, if I deny what is entailed by true analysis, I may as well just give all this up and become a hedonist, straight up.
Well, I would hope so. The hope that out of just simply love of God, even if our minds can't bring us to certain theological levels, we wouldn't turn against God and such wicked things.
Yeah, totally.
But that being said, I do think there needs to be more comfort in knowing that I sound wrong now, but I don't know everything. I need to still research this, or the evidence doesn't exist yet, or any number of things. The idea that in our arrogance that we're going to know the answer to all these questions speaks, I think, spiritually of ourselves and not in a good way. That being said, though, interestingly enough, I'm doing the opposite sort of research. I'm working on an article which I hope to submit to an academic journal on Mariology of the first 2 centuries. And I'm going full bore, full-blown veneration, full-blown all the crucial Marian doctrines, perpetual virginity, all these things. We've had a debate on this topic. And a lot of this will be with new information. And so I do think that, like I feel with icons, hint, 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 that we've seen the conversation go from mocking the Orthodox to, I think, a good debate between you and Alex Soren, but ultimately no one's mocking, I feel, the Orthodox position anymore. And I think it's because of good work from myself and Michael Garton. And I think the next domino of the fall, but we're going to strike first, will be Mariology, where I think then you guys are going to be doing the catch up like Gavin Ortlund had everyone coming after him for about 12 months. before he
Well,
stopped talking about icons ever again.
I'm very keen to see how you interact with my Augustine one, because again, as I said, I'm already a good way through the research now. It's going to be most interesting. I'll say that.
Well, we could definitely follow up on that, but there's so much Mariology long before Augustine and explicit statements of veneration by St. Ambrose. I was reading one in passing in a footnote from a Schumacher article that it's like, okay, if Augustine had some aberrant views, what's this really mean? The interesting thing, and maybe something you look into in doing your deep dive, is that with St. Augustine, the thought is that he's actually was a contrarian in some of these things, but towards the end of his life started becoming more mainline with everyone else. For example, veneration of the saints, and essentially full-blown embracing the veneration of St. Stephen, prayers to him, veneration of his relics. So I do think that with a lot of things with Augustine, it is worth looking at, well, how did he adapt over time? And I think ultimately, and probably won't be in our lifetime, so who knows with AI, that Augustine's written so many volumes of work that I think we may find out a lot of things we think are actually Augustine may not be. It could be people around him, it could be people slightly after him. And this would nuance a lot of studies of Augustine as well. But I think for yours and my purposes, as well as all living scholars today, we work with what is considered authentic and work from there. I think is a fair way to do it. But
Yeah, exactly.
That said, we have this complaint. Had a negative interaction with Paul and X during Holy Week. Apologies for that. So you ruined this Holy Week, Paul.
Seriously, because that was like after the debate. Basically, I had so many people on my case. I didn't, as far as I never tried to start anything with anyone. It was always I let them come, and then I would, depending on how I felt, I'd either try to de-escalate or just match energy to try and say, hey, you can't bully me. So if it got spicy, then that's forgiven, and I hope you don't hold if I had aggression back to you.
So where's the aggression stop? He doxes you dox him back.
Well, it would stop when one of our family members are dead. I think that might be a bit too far, but
yeah, thanks to you and other Orthodox apologists online, there is a lot of running to the fire on these topics, and it's like each question doctrine is saved. I'm not exactly sure what's being communicated here. Forgive me. I'm a little.
I think he's saying that there's been Orthodox doctrines that online have been poo-pooed a lot, and you basically said this already. But with your work and those of others, those doctrines have much more formidable defenses now, like with Garton and icons, especially, which I am going to be working on responses to, but after he releases his second volume. So that's going to be fun.
And I look forward to you getting into the weeds with the stuff with Dionysius, and there's more research to be done there, but that people take this stuff serious. And just as a plug, I will be having a discussion/debate, Pastor Samuel Farag, on the Theotokos and her veneration, whether it's apostolic. That should be on the Bottom of the Rabbit Hole channel in a little while. The live discussion happens in a couple weeks, but it's going to be pre-recorded and it will be online. And also in Iron Sharpens Iron, there was whether orthodoxy is the church. And there was a debate between Pastor Samuel and I. And that's not yet on YouTube, but you could check out Iron Sharpens Iron for the MP3s of that radio show if you want to check that out. But now let's do something we can all agree upon, making fun of the ELCA.
Absolutely.
So we have this thread that was sent to me, and I'm surprised that you would think this would be all over Cleave to Antiquity. Maybe he did it, but he does a lot of streams. Not sure if this got lost in the shuffle, but this is definitely stream worthy. And yes. I don't want to pan this with you as a way of as a kind of triumphalism, like everything about Protestantism is bad. It's degenerating into, hedonism, all of it, and atheism. Luther single-handedly created the Western world and all of its problems. Like that's not kind of my point here. But the ELCA has all sorts of screwed up stuff. I have the right to say this because as an infant, I was baptized into the ELCA. And when not I was brought up like a faithful Christian, but when I became a Christian and started trying to discern where do I go to church, I very early settled upon, well, I guess I'll go back to the church I was baptized in, you know? And so it used to be Pastor Murden. Then it was a female pastor by the time I came back and things like this. And the funniest thing I remember about being the ELCA, and there's good people there, because Lutherans as mainliners are people that have been there for generations, many of them, which means they're normal, right?
Yeah.
Converts have zeal, but they're also crazy. And people born into it are more normal. I don't think they should be very, what's the word? It should be very controversial to make that observation. But that being said, I took part in a youth ministry in New Orleans, and this was right after the hurricane. When I say right after, like a year later or something like that. It wasn't like I was going through floodwaters or something like that. And the people in New Orleans are great people, by the way. And it doesn't matter where you are, Ninth Ward, you know, the dangerous part and all that. There's great people in New Orleans. But I'm a New Yorker, so we're not used to people like being kind of genteel in public, I suppose. So that being said, I didn't anticipate when speaking to Lutherans there that when I'd say, you know, something like, we shouldn't have these homosexual pastors because it's clearly against what the scriptures say, I was given the comment, really? You're from New York. You believe that? Like the idea would be only like very conservative Lutherans in somewhere in the middle of Missouri or the unhappy Danes in Wisconsin would think such a thing. But the New Yorkers are more enlightened. That's the more enlightened part of Lutheranism. And so I spoke to a Lutheran pastor there, ELCA, of course, and he was kind of lamenting that where this church was going. But again, as someone who probably was brought up Lutheran and just in the church is sort of like, the ship is sinking, I don't know what to do. I'll just keep showing up on Sunday and doing my best job. And so this is the setup for this thread on Reddit, as we can see shared here on screen, which is that they've done everything they can to eviscerate themselves, to make their paying customers angry by calling them stupid, by calling their scriptures wrong, by calling them unenlightened. They've done everything they can to shoot themselves in the foot. And then they make this Reddit thread like, what happened? Why isn't this working? So I found that pretty insane. But instead of me lamenting about it, let's see what it actually states. How can we reach out to those under 50 from the ELCA? And yes, this is actually, that's their actual Reddit. I'm sure we've all read the news articles, watched the videos on YouTube, like yours truly, or Paul, and see the posts in social media. Young and early middle-aged people are flocking to Catholicism, Orthodoxy, the especially mentally impaired Anglicanism. Oh, wait, I added that. With unprecedented numbers of new converts expected to join at Easter or Pentecost. I mean, it's tough not to see why. The Cathodox, I think it's pretty cool that he used that term, have a large presence on YouTube, actively discuss faith both in online and offline facets of public life, do evangelism, etc. I'm sure Pope Leo's ascension to the papacy was also a factor for some. I'm not exactly sure, but I guess I'm not plugged in enough, so I have no comment. With this in mind, how do we reach out to young people seeking faith and truth? If you were to give an elevator pitch about the ELCA, what would you say? Should more ELCA clergy have a YouTube presence? I think that's a pretty obvious one, but is there a potential ELCA equivalent of Word or on Fire or Father Josiah Trenham awaiting in the wings? Something else. You don't want to wake up one day and everyone is either Cathodox, non-denom, Baptist, but I won't call myself a Baptist, Pentecostal, or whatever small smattering remnants of Anglicans, LCMS, and PCA, OPC types remain. So meaning like, the mainliners are the ones dying out. So let me give you a comment before I get into some of the comments there, but I think there's just a lot to digest right then and there.
Well, as an opening, too long didn't read, ELCA's interesting in that they break the usual pattern of what happened with the mainlines. Normally it was that a mainline went liberal, and then it was then the conservative bloc broke off from that and started a conservative denomination. So from the PCUSA, they went lib, and then you had the PCA. and the Episcopal Church, they went lib, and then you have the Continuum first, and then you had the ACNA. And that's the typical pattern. But it was actually the other way around for the Lutherans, where the Lutherans, they did have a stint in the mid-20th century with liberalism, but they successfully fought and pushed out their liberals, and ELCA emerged from that. So that's the interesting reversal of the pattern. And so ELCA's just basically been a hive of liberal theology extreme liberal theology ever since, such that, like, look, they're even in like the generous, I don't like using the term anyway because it's more of an umbrella, but even in like just the general sense of the principles shared among quote unquote Protestant denominations, ELCA's just not even Protestant. Like they are flat out liberal. They have a fundamentally anti-Protestant, anti-Christian view.
But to be fair to them, they didn't change on the sexuality issues into the 2000s.
Yes.
And I would say this because this is in my living memory. You know what I mean? And the gender stuff changed before then, but you have not really seen it until the 2000s. So it's
right. That's when a lot of the stuff came out.
And so that's why it was a slow death. But then when you start seeing it, it becomes a very fast death.
Exactly. Yeah. So same thing with the Church of England. They had certain degrees of women's ordination well before the same-sex stuff, which even the same-sex stuff is being pushed back. But anyway, to the point of this issue, it's been basically largely a boomer novelty to have all these liberal social projects and think, oh, look how great this is. It's so tolerant. And also with the side belief that, oh, this is going to reach the youth because they were once youth and it reached them. Unfortunately, as that Reddit thread showed, they're getting a very nasty wake-up call that, no, actually, a lot of the youth don't want this stuff. There's actually a bit of a bifurcation where you have either youth who are going even more liberal and extreme to the point of just like Christianity as such, even in liberal forms, are just bad, or you get much more traditionally minded ones who will either go to more traditional traditions like the East or Rome or Anglicanism, or even just like the LCMS for that matter, or they trad max so hard that they go back to European paganism. That's on the rise too, with groups like Asatru, for example. Although most of them tend to be liberal, which is interesting, but there's a growing right-wing contingent. But be that as it may, they are really late to the party. If they're only just realizing this now, they are really, really late to the party. And having read that thread,
scriptures say, without a vision, the people perish, right?
Yes.
And so people follow conviction, and generationally, I think it's a mixture of technology and the failure of this normal institutions, which we're seeing economically and socially worldwide, that the sort of like normie stuff automatically has skepticism. So like, for example, I'm old enough where I think it's strange if you think the moon landing is a fraud, but most people younger than me think you're crazy if you think the moon landing actually occurred. And so it's
that's a real thing.
There's a generational divide on these questions, and it affects also religion. So like, I'm one of those shades of gray people where I have very conservative views about what the church should allow, but I have more permissive views about society. Though, for example, I'd be fine working with people with different identities and whatnot in a secular context. And I would judge people by their actions, not by, what their alleged identity, happens to be at the time. But this being said, it's, and because I come from the generation where, what your sexuality is and all that, it's not your business. Right. So it's like, that's your thing. And I'm just going to keep it professional here. But that being said, I think generation, people don't want that. You almost have, everyone wants to impose one ideology or another. And so with the mainline ideas, those norming institutions failing, people are starting to seek that the opposite of what's being imposed be imposed. Because what are you paying for with your tax dollars? Just go to local library. You're having all sorts of race theory, gender theory, sexuality theory, all these things imposed upon you. And you're paying tax dollars for it. So if you don't think that's going to create a response from people, rightly or wrongly, you're judging wrongly. So now the LCI has this wake-up call that they were part of this agenda in opposing these liberal social ideologies on people. And now they're trying to figure out, wait, why do we lose our paying customers, right? So with looking at the responses, people tend not to get it. We have this one. I know someone who has become a successful Orthodox influencer. I kept it 100 and said it was a result of being politically reactionary rather than conviction. They later had a stream about, oh, that's about me, about Ron Paul, the Orthodoxy pipeline. So there you go. In their personal life, the person does mission work and ties to the person, not extreme cynic, but actually believes Orthodox movement briefly. Catholics approaches men's issues, so they have a huge built-in audience. Yeah. Lutherans are still stuck in the 20th century here. Everything has changed. All right. So like the fact that we're adjacent to men's issues already gives us people that are going to be sympathetic to what we have to say. Well, they're not going to be sympathetic to the LCA. You've been just calling them terrible people for the last 30 years.
Exactly.
Though if you go more than 30 years ago, they would have been considered misogynist, quite frankly. And I know that personally because again, the world's changed so fast. That being said, they have conspiracy theory takes on history and church history. They can play the truth fast and loose while mainstream people like us cannot. I suppose Luther's reinvention of canon things is more stable than, I don't know, canons of the church preceded by centuries, but okay. Catholic is a right-wing movement. It has a political install base, which I think is correct. Ironically, they are highly combative, vitriolic. The angry male base looks for this. So what is the solution? I think Lutherans should get out of the politics business, which I think is correct. For my church frequently prays for equity and justice, and sometimes for indigenous medicine and sciences. I'm just sorry. And again, as someone who actually believes in Chinese medicine, because I grew up with it, don't annoy your customers that do like medicine man stuff, right? It's just so, that's medicine man stuff, So anyway, even though I agree with those things, I cringe and fear my children won't have a normal church to bring their children to. So many normal families and men have pretty much left for the right. The last solution, family building. If the church fosters an environment where young men and young women can get married, I guess they have to have, back to the 50s, they got to have square dances and get them hitched. They'll be more loyal to the bedroom than to the politics, or born out of the lack of bedroom activity. I'm sorry. I guess people are they're venting their frustrations from the bedroom to religion. This will not be won on the theological battlefield. Average people think about image over substance. And so it's yes, exactly. We want these angry reaction young men here in the ELCA because we can give their angry dispositions the law to crush their egos and worst instincts, and then give them the sweetness of the gospel. So people know that's like very Lutheran, law, gospel, hermeneutic. Yeah. So that's just a joke off that. We have this. I don't see any solid LCMS people engaging in these circles, but I wish they would. The conversations are great. I thought I had a conversation with a Pastor Wolfmiller or something.
Brian Wolfmiller, yeah.
Yeah, he's LCMS. He does it. They're out there.
So, yeah. Yeah, they exist.
Not LCA, but we have, I'm LCMS, but I have no problems in the Orthodox, the roots for us all. And, I know like people with apologetics would be like, how could someone say that and then still be Lutheran? I believed that, and I was Protestant for years. It was just historical conviction. There was no faith involved in it.
Yeah. If you just mean like there's churches in the East which are like the oldest, like Jerusalem, like Alexandria, and so on, then yeah, obviously, yeah.
So we have some follow-up comments which I need to share and screen so people can read them. We definitely need more presence on social media, but also make sure your own church is doing the basics. Is your Google business listing up to date with ours, your denomination, worship times, and messaging? Is there, by the way, my local Orthodox church definitely isn't. It's like so trapped in the past, it's crazy. The priest is over 90 and, Is your website up to date with all the same information? Do you have a Facebook page? Who uses Facebook anymore? Are you using it? Who uses Facebook anymore? Posting about events, inviting people, making reels out of sermon clips. We need to invite young people. We also need to be findable. Pretend you have never heard of your church and start Googling Lutheran church near me or Sunday school near me or welcoming church near me and see if your church pops up. Can you easily find all the information you need? If not, start inputting that information to the internet via website, Google, social media. So let me just make one comment, then I'll pass the microphone to you, which is this, and I highlighted it. It's kind of saying like, oh, we're just doing the wrong social promotion. We're doing bad advertising. It's like bad public relations, right? That's kind of like this critique here. And they're not getting like, no, it's the product you're selling is despicable and people don't want it. You don't have no messaging, you have bad messaging. So that's my critique. I mean, I don't know what you want to add.
And I will say they're right in that the lack of effective messaging means is definitely hurting them. The single best thing that person brought up is lacking a lot of things they should do, but the single best thing he brought up, he or she or they or Zia, was that they need to do reels. Like reels are actually a very effective thing. Like Craig, do you know of the he looks Orthodox, but he's a Syrian Church of the East, that pastor Mari Emmanuel?
Is he the guy that is actually in schism from everyone? And he got stabbed in the eye?
So you've heard of him. Here's the thing. He's just a local one congregation priest who lives not that far from me, like a 20-minute drive.
Oh, that's right. He is Australian, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. In Australia, exactly. But he's world famous now because of the Instagram reels and the YouTube reels, TikTok. He is
Australian's not a racial group.
Well, actually it is. I have a lot to say about that, but that's for another time.
Yeah, well, they're the Aborigines then.
No, that was before Australia. They're the Aora people, Yolngu. Anyway.
Okay. They're all English and Lebanese.
Not Lebanese, but yeah. Anyway, Mari, he's mega famous across the world. Otherwise, he would just be
he's basically a Protestant.
He's pretty much, which is absolutely based, by the way. But he got that because he's got a killer team of people with the social media. He's world famous because of that. Otherwise, he'd just be a single congregation pastor. So they're right in that sense. But you're also correct that the actual product they're selling would not be helped by that much, if at all. If anything, it would actually be counterproductive. It would make it would expose things to a wider audience. People who otherwise never heard of the ELCA or just ELCA would now see it and be like, ew, I've got to avoid them like the plague. They don't realize that. One of the commenters that you mentioned did realize that, like with the whole kooky stuff they teach. So that one commenter was like the most grounded in that regard. But that's kind of the problem. Like that's not going to be solved unless alcohol reforms.
And even that commenter concluded they had to improve everyone's bedroom lives.
Exactly. That is such a typical liberal response, even from so-called liberal Christians. When you say spicy theological views, they're just like, you haven't had sex, have you? Just that kind of snark.
There's a ELCA California church that prays the Our Mother, said Our Father, Lord, have mercy. Don't count out Facebook. Boomers will financially provide the growth, and there's growth for late bloomers. There's a lot of money with the boomers, that's for sure. Very base schism into oblivion. That's the ELCA. We have a very confused man. He venerates Orthodox, Coptic, Assyrian saints, and my guess would be that he's just an ecumenist. I don't mean that in the pejorative. You just say, oh, well, we're all the church, or the church has 14 monks, or whatever. But Bishop Mari looks eccentric. No, I suppose he just looks like an Assyrian. He has the Coptic black garbs that people will notice. I thought he was Assyrian, but can I tell you? So, I mean, the fact they think you're going to Google welcoming church near me because they got to be more welcoming and people are looking for affirmation. No, people want conviction. They always have. That's why the scriptures say that. Without a vision, the people perish. That should be your church's growth mantra. But here's the problem. People just concur with these opinions. We have like this: our online presence is terrible. Most of our congregations over 70, right? So that's apparently the internet's fault. We just got to advertise more on the internet. When people under 40 offer the skills or thoughts, it's unfortunately not well received by the interim pastor. Our confirmation class this year has 2 kids. Oh, that's bad. The congregate's reaching a point when it won't be able to financially sustain. That's been a problem in New York. Their whole strategy was to sell property in New York City, which already tripled in price since the 2000s. So they're selling that stuff. So it's crazy. Yet there's hesitation to make changes, both sad and frustrating. Oh my gosh, this must be the first ever. As a 17-year-old Lutheran convert. Who is this kid? This kid's cool. It's pretty cool. 17-year-old. I mean, that's the unicorn right here. What drew me to the church was positive Lutheran figures online, like Pastor Paul Dries. I guess he's related to Drew Brees. And that's a football joke. And strong, visible values about modern issues and traditions. All right? Modern issues and traditions. So like I said, this is one of the people that actually want the ELCA messaging. So very interesting. A church that is not afraid to speak up, teach, or question is a confident church, and something will attract a lot of young people. All right. Now, just be honest, man. Are you the only 70-year-old guy there? Why are you offering that?
Okay.
With that, or he's trolling?
Okay, so I was thinking, I never heard of Paul Dries, so I thought either this is actually like a properly ELCA pastor, or maybe it was like a more moderate pastor. Nope, I looked him up. PaulDries.com, the opening line, I'm a progressive Lutheran pastor sharing a gospel message of liberation online. Yeah, say no more. We know exactly what you teach on every single issue.
Now we have this comment. Does the fees advertising really work? Is the LDS growing? And the answer is no. I mean that the Mormon approach is, in the past was decent for them, but they've liberalized a lot and they've gone the affirmation angle and it's hurt them. They're having good success overseas where ground game still counts a lot and people still look for services and they'll get them to perhaps convert to your church. But like this has been the thing that's helped Orthodoxy punch so above their weight, despite having really most clergy and bishops, I would say, be ambivalent about missionary work and evangelism. I wouldn't say they're against it, but they're not out there. That's not very high in a lot of their priorities. And there's all sorts of social reasons and stuff for this. I don't want someone to clip that and be like, oh, Craig just disproved all of Orthodoxy. They don't preach the gospel. I mean, then how did I get this medal behind me for doing exactly that? But the point is, it is a real issue. Father Danis Zozoev talks about it in Russia, and he pushed back against it. And it's something anyone who does mission work runs into. And so that being said, we have this here where someone says, the Lutheran parish next street over has 9 people on Sunday. They're living off an annuity, and the average age is 75. Well, quite frankly, that's my local Russian church. That's essentially what they are, and so it's Orthodoxy could have the same problems in the Northeast because a lot of it's demographics. So up until maybe even the 80s, Germans were marrying Germans and Danes are marrying Swedes and stuff like that. And hence people would stay Lutheran. Now everyone doesn't just marry between denominations, which was actually kind of new. They're marrying between races and stuff. And that actually affects a church that ultimately, sorry, Lutherans, is a ethnically based movement. There's a reason why there are countries that have state churches that are Lutheran, and so it's just like there's Russian Orthodoxy, there is German Lutheranism. That is a thing, and that does affect their ability if they don't start appealing to people the way that, in the sense, Orthodoxy has in the last 10 years, particularly after COVID. That they're going to lose people because they're not going to maintain the cradles, which was their strength for centuries.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's why those other traditions, which really haven't had as strong of an ethnic basis, at least they've fared a bit better. Like the Pentecostals, right from the beginning, their whole thing was multiracial ecclesial composition. And likewise with the Presbyterian churches, obviously they had their, like with all churches in America, they had their thing with the race issues and slavery and what have you. But unlike the LCMS, which was, that was basically an ethnic German church, like the Russian Orthodox Church in America and other like churches, they got over those issues a fair bit earlier. And so they've kind of fared a bit better in terms of the demographic issues. Now they've come across other issues since then, but in terms of the demographic issue, it's not quite as pronounced.
Now we have this question. We Orthodox don't do prison ministry, but how can you do that when prison chaplaincy is based on Protestant models? I know a monk, I won't say his name for his salvation's sake, at the monastery that has been doing prison ministry for years. A lot of prison ministry is simply establishing relationships with people and having half a brain to know that most of these probably are meant to manipulate and compromise you, but for the few people, it might really help that you do it. So I think simply you show compassion to people, and if they're willing to listen to what the scriptures teach and what the saints teach, then so be it. But I don't think it needs a model, because you kind of already have a literally captive audience, pun intended. Now, right before we continue, I just want people, again, like the video, subscribe now, stop what you're doing, like and subscribe. And also, if you're being blessed so far by this video, consider supporting the mission to Cambodia, orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate, PayPal, Venmo, and Patreon, even a small amount if you commit to support the mission Cambodia. That helps the long-term budgeting. It's very much appreciated. We have this prison ministry. Forget where you came from, embrace where you are. And that is a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie right there. So there you go.
You really are showing your age.
What is that? Is that Death Warrant? I can't remember what movie that is. I don't think it's Death Warrant. I think it's a different one. It's when he's in prison in Russia, if I remember. So there's the Orthodox parallel there. So there you go. It's a pretty cool movie. It's about the prison guards force all the prisoners to fight to death and gamble on it. And somehow Jean-Claude Van Damme gets caught in the middle of this as an American. It's pretty strange. But there you go. I think the ELCA says expensive future needs a much better theological presence online. People like Pastor Brian Wolfmiller. So we have my stablemate there. Have huge followings, that post regularly, answer questions. Pretty hard to find info online, even on the ELCA's website prior to recent updates on what most of the ELCA believe, because they're embarrassed of it. I agree. More theology, fewer gimmicky attempts to be like the big box churches. I noticed to my dismay, that there are hardly any ELCA pastors or public theologians online. The Episcopalians are lapping us. Paul Drees and Katrina Foster are my go-tos, but they seem to be the only ones that show up in my social media feed. So, like, I guess because this is every single ELCA member on the internet in this thread, at least they are supporting their. The name of the movie's From Hell.
It seems like this Drees guy is like one of their dudes, and just going by the opening line on his site, oh boy, they are in trouble. The problem is that this is where I feel sorry for the ELCA, because this creates an echo chamber, right? They're asking these people here that already are like the really faithful to the ELCA, and as a result, they're getting really bad advice. So it's sort of like, let's ask the people run us to the ground what we should do to fix things. Like, right before maybe we continue, how about we give good advice, plain devil's advocate, literally, which wouldn't be simply sell out, change everything you're doing. And my advice to this would be this: keep doing what you're doing theologically and social issue wise, because again, they don't want to change that. Yeah, it's not me giving the advice. This is fake ELCA Craig giving the advice. But don't be cruel to the people who don't agree with that, right? Yeah. Be affirming of those people, because here's the problem with the affirming people. They're not affirming. It's just a code word for meaning we don't affirm people that don't agree with us. Yeah. Right? And because so like the interesting thing is, if you go to a church that would be thought of as not affirming in trad, and I'll use as an Orthodox example, Father Moses McPherson's church. My godson goes to church there. You have people in all walks of life there. And the first time a lot of these people will go there, they might have shorts on, their tattoos exposed, and they realize other people don't do it, and then they start conforming. But it's without people being nasty to them. And so, like, as long as you are actually affirming, you could bring people along the line to the ideals that you believe in. But the problem with liberals is they have Marxist streaks where they just, at the end of the day, they want you in the gulag. They don't want you to breathe. And that's the problem. So if you don't want me to breathe, why would I feel welcome in your church? There's no compassion there. So I think that's the real problem there. We have, there's my godson right there watching the show. We have this, Craig, do you hold to the 66 book canon? And I would say it's amongst the canonical canons because it's in canon 2 of Trullo.
The Russian catechisms included. I have a whole video about this. It's actually not my video.
Yep.
It is video with River. Now is he Father River? I don't. What is it?
Yeah, he's Father
River. And on the issue of the canon, I'd recommend you look at that. Could you plug that channel name, because I can't spell anything with it?
Absolutely. So, well, his channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so his channel is New Kingdom Media. That's
right. That's right. And it's DeVoe or something is his last name.
Devereaux, yeah.
Right, New French. Kingdom, just put New Kingdom Media Truglia canon, and it'll come up. It's a great video. I know it's helped a lot of people, including those in the Orthodox side. I know that Orthodox Luigi Ben has watched that, and I think it's helped. I think in the apologetics with the Anglicans be able to be a little more respectable than most. They have the more nuanced take on the canon. I love this comment.
I want to put you on the spot on this issue. Is your canon list of canons infallible?
I mean, yeah. Why wouldn't it be? To be more specific, as discussed in the video, it's superintended by the Holy Spirit. And so we would see the things that are different and complementing one another is something that God ordained for our betterment. So, you know, it's not right. So it's a truth, but it's not a mathematical truth like 1 + 1 = 2. But also, it's not a complete vagary where, oh, this is a contradictory paradox. That's not the point either. We have the ELCA is becoming a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. So there you go. It's from hell. I have this interesting comment, and I'm not sure what's really the thing about it. Craig and Co. rarely address the implication of their obsession with St. Augustine and original sin doctrine. Okay. I think Augustine teaches canonical original sin in most of what he writes. There's things where he gives his own opinion, but again, as we're talking about, he's wrote volumes of works. We have to judge by the canons. There's a canon of Carthage for a council he attended. I know St. Philip Moscow and St. Nicodemus hold the 66-book canon. And again, St. Nicodemus would have a more nuanced view. St. Nicodemus talks about this. He cites approvingly several times a footnote to Apostolic Canon 85 in the Rudder, so you can check that out. So we have
Philaret's one of my favorite Russian Protestants.
No, he's not as proud as some people make him out to be, but he definitely read a lot of Lutherans. And speaking to reading Lutherans, let us join St. Philaret in reading some Lutherans. So
he's basically a Lutheran that venerated icons.
And the Theotokos.
True. Well, hey, Lutherans do that too, confessional ones, but anyway.
Well, they have the Our Mother, don't they? So that being said, when I began my first current call...
Rosary.
I'm sorry?
The pre-Trent Rosary as well. A lot of them like that. It's
Lutherans, so people aware, they have more like kind of like Roman Catholic practices. Like they have Stations of the Cross and stuff like that. There was a period, I think, even the 70s, where there's kind of this reactionary turn in Lutheranism, which got compartmentalized at the time to make more Roman Catholic looking their aesthetic and their practices, which is interesting because a lot of people don't really talk about that. But that's like if you went to Lutheran church 100 years ago, it would look less Roman Catholic than a Lutheran church now. So that's just an interesting thing to be aware of. When I began, at least in America, I can't speak for outside of America. So anyway, Anderson says, when I began my first current call a tick more than 4 years ago, the congregation I serve saw at most 2 people under 30 worshiping. Today, we regularly worship 15 to 20 who are under 30. So they're growing. So they went to send the 80. Not a huge increase, but still good progress. Also, the under 30s aren't just worshiping and leaving. They're getting involved. Why? What did we do? We listened. We gave them a voice. We made meaningful changes without sacrificing our doctrine traditions and made worship more appealing, and God took care of the rest. So it kind of sounds like he actually followed that advice that I kind of speculated right there, right? Like, just don't piss them off and excuse my language, and they'll stay in the church,
that's the minimum they can do. I personally didn't even want to play devil's advocate because I pride myself on being able to come up with very creative and effective solutions to big problems, and I don't want to give them advice in case any of them are listening.
No, they're definitely not going to listen to this. You don't have to worry about that. We have, does Orthodoxy affirm that Jesus used leavened bread per the Synodicon? one of the things holding me from being EO, yeah, I believe Christ used leavened bread, and I have articles on this, and it's actually very interesting to get into the details. You actually get into the different Jewish calendars that existed, which explains the little slight differences in accounts in the Gospels. So short answer is Christ used leavened bread because in doing so, he fulfilled and recapitulated all the different Judaisms of his era. But there's more of that. I think it's did the Eucharist have leavened bread? Truglia, Google it, and you'll find it on my blog. You as an Anglican may disagree, but I disagree with you. My point is, Craig, you're at odds with people like Father Stephen DeYoung who deny the original sin doctrine and say implications that every miscarriage results in a baby going to hell. This sounds like a guy that's just kind of obsessed with babies and hell doctrine. So you know what? And that was actually one of these things. Same person. He says it's insane to believe unbaptized babies don't go to heaven. All right, so insane. Now I don't know if this is an accurate quotation of Father Stephen DeYoung. So I'm by all means not talking against him, but I'm talking against this comment that's insane, and I'll tell you why. Without even taking a position, I'm going to read what the modern Greek Synod in like the year 2001 said about exactly this issue. And this is relevant because they're not considered a conservative synod. Everyone always complains about the Greeks, about how liberal they are. But let me just share a screen on that. So I have to actually stop, and then I have to start again.
Greeks being liberal. Wow. It must be a Thursday.
There you go. So let's see. I have a quotation here. So the Greek Synod was happened this century. So we're not talking about ancient times. And and on the issue of introducing prayers for unbaptized children, here's what they say. Sorry, teaching the Synod. For reasons of charity towards those parents affected by the untimely and sudden death of their child to ecclesial burial of unbaptized infants, especially regarding the fate of unbaptized infants after death, many teachings are formulated by the Holy Fathers. The dominant view in Orthodox theology is that these, as bearers of original sin, cannot inherit the kingdom of God. However, as they are free from all other sin, they are exempt from eternal condemnation, their salvation ultimately being entrusted to the justice and mercy of God. And it goes on, and essentially it says it's out of condescension that they allow these prayers because they get bad press from any news stories where children are denied these prayers and burials and stuff. So it's a kind of pragmatic document. But again, I just want to pose this here because you got to get off the internet, some of you people, or if you're on the internet, you got to start reading the Greek synods, right? And you have to see, like, all right, it's the people that you don't agree with because you don't like the idea because you find it ooky aren't insane. And that's the mainstream opinion of all the clergy. I would presume that someone like Father Stephen DeYoung has a more nuanced view, and he wouldn't be at odds with, like, again, such mainline statements such as what we just read. So I hope that kind of helps Bjorn there if he wants to be helped anyway. We have Shupin makes this claim. My LCMS friend gave me his book, and I wasn't finding any good sources. What claim? I don't know. Maybe the Levin Brennan Sonaticon. I don't know.
I think. Oh, I thought I remembered what it was. I'm not sure. I can't.
Oh well, we're getting old. All right. So, as a new ELCA convert, so again, this is probably one of three. The only reason I went to my church is because on Facebook it was said it was an LGBTQ friendly church. I would not have known that just by looking at the website. I was very much a research a place online person. I'm trying to just fix the English here. Before I go there, so I would have appreciated more info on the social media page. Website, it all turned out well for me. I'm happy there. But I'd love to see our congregation grow with younger folks. So it's apparently not in a young congregation, and
yeah, exactly.
Part of the social issues, but I will say this: it's better that people start drawing to God from somewhere than nowhere. But you can't stay at a place like that, obviously, not for yourself.
Yeah, and that case is a very good example of how their best bet, short of actually changing their doctrine, or reverting it rather to the faithful doctrine of their ancestors, the best they can hope for is just to openly advertise their views. Then they'll be able to more effectively attract the small number of people who are like-minded, but at the same time, there's going to be, for every one of those people, there's going to be like 100 others who are going to look at those statements and just wince and move on. So that's their best bet. They're going to turn off a lot more people, but they'll maybe pull in some if they're just more savvy social media wise.
Now, someone has a quick question. They said that what is there between not being the kingdom and being condemned? And this is a teaching from the Council of 1815, which I just think puts it very succinctly. It's quoted in an article by Truglia, which is in Revista Theologica. It's an academic journal I'm also published in. And quoting the council, because I don't know this council from any other translation than from this article, they do not experience suffering due to the lack of personal sin. Infants who die unbaptized are not tormented, being cleansed from voluntary sins. However, they do not deserve the kingdom of God because they were not cleansed of the stain of ancestral sin, the divine bath, and did not obtain spiritual rebirth. All right. So the idea is that they are not tormented. Okay. So they're not going to be in the kingdom though, because they are not baptized. They're not joined to Christ. You know, all of us who have been baptized to Christ have put on Christ. They obviously don't have faith where they could attain to baptism by blood or, you know, these other mystical ways which people join to Christ. But again, like the other synod I quoted, we leave these things ultimately to God, the judge, but that's why there's that normative teaching there. I mean, do you have really a view on this, Paul? Is there even really, because it just seems like there's as many teachings as there's Anglicans. And if that's not fair, could you give me maybe the magisterial Anglican teaching is on this question?
Well, ditto for the East. It seems to be a matter that's very controversial in both of our areas, probably more so in the East. I think Anglicans, they tend to be more.
I would say not in our official documents. I just read two councils.
Likewise.
All right. So what are your official conciliar statements on the question?
So official statements, they tend to, like with most doctrines, really, the strategy of our Anglican confessions is to affirm a clear but concise and small doctrinal core, but allow for liberty beyond that. In the.
They don't answer my question. Where is there?
So in light of that, you have our 39 articles, which basically affirm 39 articles and the Book of Common Prayer, which basically affirm a pretty standard, simple Western Church Augustinian idea of original sin. And
does it touch specifically on the unbaptized?
From memory, I'd have to look back. Our official confessions are, well, again, as I say, they're pretty brief. They don't tend to speculate on certain issues like that. So you can find a diversity of opinion, I think.
We have a few comments here. We have, what does Craig think about your recent petrology video on Clement? And I'll find out tomorrow morning on the exercise bike because I didn't know there was one. So there we go.
Give it a watch.
I'm joking a bit, but there exists no cool ELCA edits where there exists great Orthodox Catholic edits. So again, just we're winning the social media game, which is a huge force multiplier because it takes less money and all that. And let's see. All right, so let's do a few more of these. We have, as a 20-something ex-evangelical who started going to the ELCA church. What drew me to the ELCA was that my church had a clear stance on affirming human rights in queer and trans people. They had rainbow doors outside the church that said God's doors, are open to all and very visible on the website. They're very welcoming and have open communion. I craved this after being a close-minded conservative congregation for most of my life that did not always walk the talk. The other big draw is that my church is very involved in the community with ways to serve and be involved as a new member, including food pantry, hosting community dinners, feeding homeless folks, helping out at events. First, I also like the Lutheran emphasis on grace rather than works. In summary, I could definitely see that. I'm with you on that, but also I could definitely see why. In summary, we have a great welcoming community, and there are lots of ways to be involved. I think any ELCA church can have that going for it. But he never said they're growing. Just said why he liked it. But exactly. Right, again, it's the echo chamber, but you could tell there would be, even though they're collapsing, they would hit some sort of floor where you find that one niche group of people that's actually what they're looking for. But that's obviously not the majority of the ELCA. We have it's nice to see a live stream with these two.
Hey, Philip, good to see you, man.
Now, was Philip always Orthodox? Like, was he Protestant? When Orthodox? Who's Philip?
Believe, Philip, you're a convert from memory, from the stream we did. I believe you are.
We'll see. Oh, who knows? We have, are these people serious? And yes, serious as cancer. And we have the other, Paul, when are you converting to Orthodoxy? Over under 7 years, Paul?
When the pigs fly.
Well, it could happen. We'll see. We'll see. I think eventually a lot of people are in apologetics because they're already questioning how they work through issues. And I just think the evidence really starts getting more and more hard for a lot of these ideologies vis-a-vis orthodoxy, I so humbly believe. With that said, we have this comment. I think the LCA has raised a whole crop of late Gen X millennial pastors on 100% on board with the emerging church movement. And now, unfortunately, that ship has sailed and sunk.
Yeah.
Sailed and sunk. Instead of a constant drumbeat of burn it all down and innovation, seems what people actually want is some stability and substance, right? For no better reason that the world doesn't feel stable, right? People projecting psychological needs. They don't need to hear burn it all down. They want stability and substance. And we have Orthodox comment. Yeah, I converted 11 years ago. So there you go. Orthodox has been Orthodox for a while. Excellent.
This comment alongside that one near the top that was basically saying the same thing in more detail. This one alongside that are the most accurate. Like, yes, you actually know what's the problem to an extent. Maybe they think that the pro-gay theology stuff would be attractive or not, but otherwise that is spot on.
Yeah, young people seem to be more drawn to theology, which I find actually a little strange because I became a Christian for non-theological reasons. I wanted salvation from sin. Little detail. But it does seem that people really just want to get into the weeds of theology. I actually know the local parish priest, right, wanted to know, like, why do people want to get catechized in such heavy-duty stuff? Because that's not most of the people he's catechized for his whole life. Right. It's just, but that's what the young people want. They are obsessed with this because, again, they're looking for a system of thought that's not the materialism. And I mean that in the epistemological sense that's taught in the secular school systems. So we have this here. Do you think that ROCOR or OCA has the most converts? And I think it's OCA, and simply because of English language. For better or for worse. Personally, I actually like a very Russian church. I'm very accustomed to it, but it's not as successful in evangelism, not in America, obviously. And we have Antioch. Wait, we're sure transportation of pigs and livestock via airplanes has occurred. Paul. They've put pigs on planes.
Classic ego. Change the definitions of words and declare victory.
There you go. We've learned a lot from the internet. We have this. I am skeptical of some of the claims about mass conversion to the Roman or Orthodox churches. I think much of it's driven by rad-trad groups online, and it may not be reflecting reality. Groups like Word on Fire have also grown closer with MAGA, which makes their success just another example, right? When media capture, something else to consider is immigration. The U.S. has many immigrants from places where Roman Catholicism is very dominant, but you do not see that with Lutheranism today. I do think that the ELCA has a massive problem with passion. Too many are nominal cultural Christians who do not want to invite people to church or share their faith, again, because, the cradles. But at the same time, we need to be very cautious in trying to copy some of the online groups. So, I think this commenter rightly diagnoses that, yeah, there's this countercultural impulse here. That's what's really creating this. But he just dismisses them. Again, it's that typical, don't actually be affirming to these people's opinions instead of, all right, well, how do we use this to bring people this way? And that actually solves the issue. They're not making converts because they're not affirming people.
Exactly. Yeah. He knows the problem and he knows a solution or the solution even, but he doesn't want it to go that way. So, all right, well, have fun with your little glorified Dungeons and Dragons club.
Well, there you go. I'm more of an Axis and Allies man myself. I see a lot of Roman Catholics talk about unity with Eastern Orient Orthodox, Paul. When will we as traditional Protestants start reaching out to them?
We already
Um,
have. We
I
actually already
thought
have.
there's been plenty of ecumenical discussion, especially with Rome.
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of done stuff parallel with the East, where I've done a lot of research into this recently for a video I have coming up. Be excited, people! But the Eastern patriarchs have been doing a lot of ecumenical outreach to like the Orientals, to the point where in Alexandria and Antioch, there's actually some mutual recognition of certain, not full communion to be clear, but of certain structures and even certain practices, like with marriage, for example, recognizing that.
That's a big problem today.
It is, yeah, it's a very big thing. And with the Anglican tradition, we've basically done the same thing, but I think we've basically advanced further. Whereas many of the patriarchs are hoping to get to a stage of full communion or intercommunion, I think the Anglican churches are basically there. We've basically taken that same conclusion from the 1989 and 1990 synods that the Eastern Orthodox did with the Orientals, where they said in these statements, we agree that our difference is rather terminological and not substantive. Now, and the patriarchs haven't all accepted that. That's the key thing that's still keeping the anathemas in place. It's still somewhat debated. Not just that, not really that statement entirely, but issues like
anathemas? We still anathematize. How about you?
Well, yeah. Well, we do. The issue is like we're with revisiting the issue, whereas the Anglicans, we had our own commission with the Orientals, and I think we much more quickly just went, okay, yeah, our differences actually aren't substantive, so we're cool. I think that's basically what's already happened. So we're actually more advanced in terms of ecumenism with the Orientals, for us Anglicans at least.
Yeah, I just say that it's ultimately ecumenism is a Protestant sort of movement, and the reason is because we're dealing with people that really don't have holy orders. They're really not the church, but we should definitely speak to people and get closer relations with people and hopefully convert them to the truth. Instead of dismiss out of hand, you would think that someone who's already a Christian in a normal group is that much closer than a complete pagan. So these are people we should also be reaching out to and bringing to the truth. We have this: if you get a hold of people for their conscience is seared, then they'll be receptive to good theology that lines up. So I think what Nathaniel is saying is that people could be drawn to a system of thought, and then maybe that will convince them or help them understand their need for a savior. And I would just say it also creates Pharisees. So, like, again, however God brings in the church is good. But I do see like a lot of self-righteousness as a result of this. It's more important to be right about these intellectual issues than to even be a halfway decent human being, which is very concerning. So I just want to point that out, because I'm not even saying, I'm not trying to, virtue signal. I'm saying be halfway decent. Just don't be a complete scumbag. And, exactly. And that is very helpful. And I purposely use such strong wording because what we see when people actually try to destroy each other's lives, there's a reason why even the old school apologists, so like James Lucatus, may he rest in peace. I won't say other names because they're not dead, but right, they use burner phones and stuff, because in apologetics, it's so much about being right. Then it's about winning, and then it's about, well, I can win by destroying this other person. And you remember when John Colarafi left that comment in that show we did together? And he left the comments thing along the lines of that you're doing apologetics wrong if you're trying to destroy people, right? But that's what people do. And this whole really channel's dedicated to it, and then people following it, and you're destroying their souls too. But everyone's trying to be right, and I just, we're talking about the unbaptized and children. They're saved because they're entering the kingdom of God as little children, not because they're ultra virtuous, not because they're ultra right. And so I do think people need to be mindful of that. We have orthodoxy has grown in places where demographically people in cities and areas are stable, not decreasing. Urban decline reflects the areas as well. Say, like, people are traveling hours to attend liturgy. And so, yes, like the typical old factory town had Orthodox churches because they worked the factory years ago, and that's hollowed out. And so you're losing people because of demographics. That's big in central New York where I am. Any advice, wisdom for pursuing another church? Currently non-denomination evangelifish. I like that. It's cute. But as of tomorrow, Orthodox catechumen. God bless you. When a married family man, my kids are happy to change, but have the rest of this. There's a but here. But what? The wife is hesitant to anything resembling high church, presumably due to being so different from our Pentecostal Baptist backgrounds. Both have grown up in that environment. End of question. Again, prayer, be affirming in reality. It's kind of tough because you don't really have a spiritual father and a long-term relationship with discerning these spiritual things the Orthodox way outside the church. And being a catechumen, you're just now starting to begin. And so I think this could take a lot of different looks. As long as you're bringing your wife increasingly into the church and your family increasingly in, I think you're on the right path. And so, I think one size fits all. We do it exactly this way. We go, or that's it. If that's more likely to fail, then you're not serving the actual purpose of bringing to the church. So I'd say be pragmatic, and personally, better really than anyone, what will help this person. I think also sometimes, and my wife's listening, so she can hear my opinion on this, but women have reasons, but those reasons actually aren't the motivations. There's feelings behind that. And so a lot of this would be, you could hear reasons for her objections to orthodoxy, but ultimately you have to take leadership and be mindful of her feelings and try to lead in the direction. And not always, again, in the apologetics world, it's always about disproving people. Because most people's objections in the heart. And so one thing I've been grateful for with Jose and making the documentary on icons, and God willing, we'll be doing a documentary on the Theotokos, is that I could lay out the evidence in front of you, and the other Paul could put his nose in the air and be like, no, I'm not convinced. Fine, whatever.
Vice versa.
Other Paul and I could have a debate on this someday. But a documentary format, which is why the other Paul also does documentaries, is helpful with trying to get to the heart. So it's not about being manipulative. It's actually trying to remove that sort of veil that's in front of people and actually appeal to the heart. And so I think with a lot of these things, if we appeal to the heart and you show that compassion on a personal level, that's very important. Now, again, that's not a replacement for correct theology. That's not the point of this channel, right? This channel is mostly history and theology and scripture exegesis. But we cannot decouple these things in the real world from compassion and being responsive to people's feelings and taking leadership, because sometimes the right response to a feeling isn't always tenderness, right? You have to have the person's well-being in mind and meet them where they are. And that's different for all sorts of different people. And you have some random guy online that certainly doesn't have everything figured out. But there you go. That's my opinion.
He asked me as well. Obviously, maybe it's a bit too late for that now. You're saying you're going catechumen tomorrow, but I would have said find a classical evangelical Anglican parish. And I say classical evangelical because in the Anglican tradition, evangelicalism meant it was still liturgical, it was still reverent, it was still traditional, but it was just more simple and stripped back versus a much more elaborate kind of liturgy. That would be one that both scratches the liturgy itch, but also is more comfortable for those coming from traditions that just aren't like that, like Baptists and Pentecostals. So I would recommend that. And in the off chance that, who knows, maybe you would try it out. That's what I would say.
No, everyone is an NPC until they are baptized in the Orthodox Church. What is that whole theory that generationally is kind of past me? I know what NPCs are. They're like the guys in the RPGs that walk around.
It's basically that. They're an AI computer programmed character. They don't have agency. They do what they're programmed to do. That's basically what people mean when they say NPCs today. People who if not literally, but functionally don't have much agency. They just do whatever they're quote unquote programmed to do, whether it's by the TV or by their politician or the newspaper and this, that, and the other.
We have, even for me as a man, my inquiry into Orthodox really began during a time of personal crisis when my heart towards Orthodox changed and I became much more open to listening and considering. And, I have a book, not about personal crisis per se, but about suffering, fellowship with Christ's suffering in the back, my exegesis in the book of Job. And link to Amazon, if you want to read the best exegesis of Job made in the last 3 years, is right there. So there you go. And it's God uses personal crisis, difficulties, not always for a punishment or something you're doing or have done, but to put you in the time, place, or in the mindset to draw closer to Him, because that's the most valuable thing there is to be close to God, to love God, and to experience God. And God experienced suffering and death on the cross for you. And I want to emphasize not just the death, but the suffering. Christ's whole life was a condescension to suffering, and we don't even understand this. He's sinless. He never had the hunger. He never had the thirst. He never had to get tired. He didn't have to feel the blows of the whips when he was being flogged and things like this. He never had to put up with our nonsense. He, though considering being in the equality of God, did not consider equality of God to be grasped, but he emptied himself and took the form of a servant, right? So he had all the greatness of heaven, and in his humility, he entered the world in a manger in a cave. He entered in a woman that was 4.5 feet tall, a very humble woman in the Theotokos. And so that is God's compassion for us, and it's a compassion that's willing to suffer. And if people want to experience God, but they don't want to experience what it's like to be like God. And that's a problem, because the reality is they want to experience a phenomena that just makes them ecstatic. And I hate to say there's all sorts of chemically induced ways where you could get things like that. But we don't want to experience what it is to be like God. And that is to suffer. And so oftentimes this personal crisis is a way in which we sanctify and get closer to God or get to God. May we all be like the few saints that were just brought up so holy that they don't go through these personal crises, but then they impose upon themselves ascesis. And it's for that reason. And I do think if we don't fast in this world, we'll hunger in the next, even in this world, but in different ways. Because all these spiritual disciplines are to help draw us to God, not to earn our salvation and some of these sort of weird things that especially taken hold in the West. And so I bring this up because I do think that this is something that's not coincidental, that most people get truly close to God because it's in response to suffering. And when you realize that, maybe we need to look with that mindset towards suffering and other aspects of our lives to seek God in these things if we don't have answers to these things. So anyway, there, Craig dropping truth bombs. So there you go. And so I don't know, I'll give you a response if you want to make one. And if not, I will quote St. Michael Moore. They want to be like Mike, but they don't want to be Mike. I think that's that's in the book Stupid White Men, if I remember right. Actually, Michael Moore, 20 years ago. So there you go.
That's classic Michael Moore. Classic Michael Moore.
They want to be Mike, but they don't want to be like. They want to be like Mike, but they want to be Mike. That's great, actually. That says it all right there, Michael Moore. I think it's the first time Mike Moore got props in a Christian stream. So there you go.
Probably the first ever.
Do you think we have time for one more Lutheran comment?
Sure, yeah.
Let's do it. One more Lutheran comment. Let's see what we got here. Let's have a good one. Maybe they could save the ELCA. We'll find out. I'm 40, finding Pastor Drew Pauldries let me know there was a mainline demonstration on Think Denomination that lined with what I was looking for. I started looking for a local church and found one with a great online presence that laid out their inclusive efforts, their efforts to serve the community, and they streamed their service, so I was able to make sure they were for me before my family walked through the door. I want to add that, though. There is some wisdom here. Is like in the city of Syracuse, the church that's growing is a church that streams. And maybe the stream's nice these days, I don't know. But I don't think the stream's very fancy. Just imagine you're thinking about becoming Orthodox. It's different. Don't you want to actually see what kind of goes on first in the 21st century where we could click on these things, right? That makes sense. That being said, you're choosing between the Orthodox churches. Which one are you going to pick? The one that you could get most familiar with when you walk in the door and have that, awkward feeling of meeting all new people. So there's much to be said in every evangelistic benefit to streaming your stuff, though I would say when it comes to the sacraments and stuff, that shouldn't be streams. You want my opinion? I I'm a believer in kicking the catechumens out at that part of the liturgy, but I'm not a bishop. But why not? I am entitled to my opinion anyway. We have, when we did walk in, we were immediately welcomed, right? You know, old school churches have greeters. An Orthodox church with a person selling you candles, right? I guess they say hi, ours does. And given a tour, which included the Sunday school area, where they assured me there was always at least 2 adults in the room with the kids. You know, I guess the LCA, that's actually comforting to know. They also provide an area outside the main worship center with quite quiet toys. Oh yes, the kids don't make too much noise. And books, so the kids can play if they can't sit still. They stream the service to a TV in the play area so the parents aren't left out. So we're seeing like a more like a family-focused comment here. I'll make it bigger. And I do think that's important to a degree, though it's kind of bad if children are so excluded from the actual worship that they don't own it for themselves. And so Orthodox Ultra make the kids own the worship because they commune when they're, you know, little babies. But then they, in a sense, never get catechized. They're just presumed that, well, you'll pick it up as you go. And most children aren't paying that careful attention. So unless you're doing like an additional Sunday school to teach doctrine, the kids really don't pick it up unless they're blessed to be ultra interested in their own right. And we're in a much more highly intellectual society and time than maybe in the past when these other more passive methods were more effective. Anyway, to finish the comment, they also have bags of fidgety toys and coloring books you can take to the pew for the littles. It's been a great experience. And I've seen that at a Greek church where, you know, you could put, you know, color the icon and stuff like that. So, awesome. Yeah, you know, be affirming the families, right? So there's something to that. We're saying you got to be more affirming. So there we go. You have any comments on that comment?
Well, I mean, he's, again, this guy, Paul Dries, he keeps coming up. He seems to be single-handedly carrying the ELCA propaganda online. But again, it's only pulling in those people who are already dead set on the liberalism that is being rejected en masse today. Either, again, just say what I said at the start, either because many of the youth are wanting traditional thought, both in theology and in ethics, but also the liberals that remain, many of them are taking their liberalism to an extreme where they just deny Christianity, period, even its more liberal perversions. And so they'll go to something like New Age or explicit paganism and what have you. So it's really a losing battle in the end. This is like relative to the pie, to the piece of the pie that still remains of that demographic. Yeah, sure, they can do things to bring them in, but that's only going to slow down the ticking of the time bomb that's still going to go off. So that's really the only ways. But yeah, even those basic things mentioned, like a family, what at least we call it a creche room, where you take your kids when they're being a bit rowdy, and there's the screen for the service and that. We have those. It's very common in the Sydney Anglican churches. I'm pretty sure there's maybe even like a diocesan level like requirement for it, which is good and fair enough. But that said, there is a big problem we do have in many of our newer churches where they segregate adult worship from the kids' worship, which has been an absolute disaster, and God willing will reverse that. But yeah, generally fascinating.
And that comes from a hyper intellectual approach, I find. I would add that, like, let's beat up on maybe ourselves, and I'll beat up more specifically on the Orthodox, which would be, this is a moment in time. It's a cultural moment in time. It's time it will pass. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, it's a special moment where social media and certain social pressures are making people take a good hard look at orthodoxy, a good hard look at more traditional Christian ideologies. But we have to be able to roll the punches, because this will change, and we're still going to have to reach people with the gospel. We're still going to have to evangelize, and we're going to have to be situational here. So we shouldn't have a triumphalism. I mean, I do think certainly an ideology like the ELCA's, which is against family, against procreation, against Christianity in general, will not have a long-term future. I mean, that's just reality. You know, the day's not going to come where that becomes popular. Sorry, it was always a bad business plan. It'll never be a good business plan. But that being said, just like I would say good churches could run into constraints and persecutions and just social norms that are contrary to their growth or to the good of their members, we need to not be triumphant, but rather be mindful that Orthodoxy or trad Anglicanism or whatever is more than the manosphere. It's more than some adjacent ideology to conservatism. That we, the quote, Father Dan Zazoya of Euratopolitans, are kingdoms not of this world. We are citizens of the heavenly kingdom, and we need our minds and thought processes in heaven. But we still live on earth. And so we need to be rolled the punches of what's here and make lemonade out of lemons, and or if we have lemonade, make some more lemonade and make hay when there's hay to be made. So let me do some audience questions and comments. If you have any, this is your opportunity. We don't always have the other Paul. So, I mean, he's a big deal. Take advantage of him while you have the chance. There you go. We got, thanks, Greg. I definitely agree with you. It's been difficult to navigate the heart difference for years. It's been a long road. That's okay. The other Paul, I appreciate your advice too. So there you go, Paul. You're saving people's lives. There you go. There you go. We got, I don't want to start drama, but what happened with Cleve Antiquity the other day? He seemed offended with something you mentioned about Rocore and edited out of his live stream recording. I gave an answer to a question, which is very interesting, about the canonical situation between Moscow and Rocore. And he just felt that it would be confusing to his audience. And right, I have the channel, though this is a lighter show, I think. I got some pretty like dense stuff I treat, both on my blog and on the show. And so I just gave a very dense answer to a question which I think he felt would confuse people. And maybe there was a legitimate disagreement, but he was perfectly polite afterwards with me. So I don't think there's any issues here. But I stand by what I said. I was correct. I'm factually correct.
Fair enough.
So that being said, well, it's more about the other Paul. I think you're right that my wife would appreciate your recommendation much more than the intensely Orthodox liturgy, but I'm not changing church because of feelings. There you go. and I think there's something to that. I think a man does need to lead, but just don't be heartless. But rather for the historicity, rather. Theology, truth, formation of my life to proper worship, adoration, genuine growth, plus sacraments are awesome. End statement. God bless you both.
Yeah. Well, I would agree. Don't change church for feels. And that's why I'm an Anglican. Not a feels thing for my part.
We have, I'm not becoming a catechumen right now, but I have been acquiring for 3 years, derailing my family's life plans. My wife is very set against orthodoxy, and again, more to pray about. And we already went over that advice. So God help you guys. You know, I got 99 problems, and thankfully right now that isn't one of them. My grandfather was a Lutheran. When he grew up in the 50s, it was in Swedish, and very different than Lutherans today. They were speaking Danish in Wisconsin and like into the 80s and stuff. So like, because again, farm towns, you didn't really need to assimilate that much, as long as you paid your bills. How he believes in ancient aliens in the History Channel. Oh, there you go. I guess they get catechized too. Don't you learn from catechesis that aliens are demons in disguise? I tried watching live stream of Orthodox service while in choir. So again, very common, very common. And so I think that covers just about all of it. So Paul, let me give you one last chance to plug before we get running. What should people be following from you? What's coming up?
Real quick, there is one last question from Orthodox Philip that I'd like to see. The one about, well, he's got two questions, but probably the former one. That one.
Okay.
That one.
Sorry.
Do you know of any Anglican scholars who have a positive view of Nicaea II? Well, I mean, Sean Luke is basically a scholar at this point, and he does have a positive view of Nicaea II, actually. So
Sean Luke,
you can go find him.
Who he is? I'm kind of...
his channel is Anglican Aesthetics. So he's an Anglican apologist.
Of course, he loves icons. He's into the aesthetics. I thought Anglican Aesthetics was an Italian guy.
Well, as you can see, I quite like my icons myself. This one is the most recent one. I'm most proud of it. It's handmade here in Australia from Tasmanian Blackwood. It's quite a beautiful piece.
Well, it's not as beautiful as this gorgeous icon of St. Patrick from theophanyworks.com. Which is
that is beautiful.
Because it is, I've never seen an icon of St. Patrick this gorgeous.
That is cool, though, St. Patrick of Ireland. I don't think anything could be more beautiful than our Lord's face, though. So, before he was despised and rejected by men, he had no beauty that people would look upon him. So, oh well. But anyway, with that said, there are also some classical Anglican theologians, like chiefly from the 17th century, who have something of a qualified affirmation of Nicaea II. I think one of them is Richard Field, and he was a big one. Very few Anglicans know him today, but back in the day, back in the early 17th century, he was actually very big. I think he's one of them from what I've heard from a friend who's read relevant portions. So maybe look him up. Yeah.
Yeah, you need I see it too. Those anathemas. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. So anyway, because we got to your question, because I didn't see it. Plugs, Mr. Paul.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you heaps for having me on, Craig. Always love coming on your channel. It's been a minute. God willing, we do it again. With that said, my channel, for people who don't already follow me, it is The Other Paul here on YouTube. I am less than 500 subs away from 10K, so please help me out there. I also have my website, theotherpaul64.com, where I'll do written stuff. It's not really frequent these days, but every now and then I'll put out something that I think is more fitting in a written form. You can also support me there to help me turn this into a job, and you get some pretty cool benefits with that too. So go check that out. And particularly follow me if you want either or both solid apologetic content that is substantive and doesn't just play into mere rhetoric for rhetoric's sake, as well as non-apologetic, positively oriented academic type content on theology, church history, and so on. And again, my latest contribution in that sphere was my new video on the ecclesiology of First Clement. So hopefully that gives you a good taster on just what you can expect from my work. So again, thank you very much, Craig.
And I just want to encourage people to like this video, share this video, subscribe. Paul's going to overtake me. He's almost at 10,000. At this rate, you're going to get more subs than I have. So I need you guys to help support the orthodoxchristiantheology.com channel by stopping everything you're doing and subscribing right now. Also, I want you guys to please support the mission in Cambodia. I want you to consider becoming missionaries. Sign up to be a missionary at orthomission.com. Also, if you can't actually do hands-on missionary work, please help support the mission financially, even if you gave just $1. orthodoxchristiantheology.com/donate. Below are the links to PayPal, Venmo, and for regular donors, there is Patreon. And I just want to share a screen because you're talking about what your channel covers. And I really want to show people why they should subscribe to Orthodox Christian Theology. And so I'm just going to put my most recent videos on screen. And here we go. There is the lovely channel that you ought to be subscribing to right now, right? So there is my 22,000 subscribers, Paul, who's catching up. But
that's why like you shouldn't be worried about me overtaking anytime soon. You got plenty of time.
It's not a competition. It's just I need to win. So, I'm kidding. That being said,
does the competition end when one of us dies or something?
There we go. Who dies the most subscribers wins, right? So I mean, Orthodox Christian Theology doesn't feed into negative content, and that's content no one else has. We're the first to cover how the mainliners are dying, the ELCA. That's the show right here. We cover the Gospel of the Magi's, myself and Michael Garton, an unbelievable document from the 2nd or 3rd century. Got into details about the relation of early, I'd say, academic or respectable pagan works that we see both in the scriptures and early fathers that no one really talks about. So just a lot of content there. We had a history of the Holy Fire, a more positive thing during Lent, where usually we always get the negative things every Lent and all these spiritual things, and we covered that. We covered a very thorough history of holy orders, the non-Chalcedonian schism. I don't know anyone else, any other channel, any other treatment this thorough on that question. We had a Q&A with an actual Russian priest, which I think is relevant because we get a lot of Anglosphere stuff, but we don't see how people think and talk and treat these topics in the old world, and we get a lot of surprising answers. And very similarly, we had an interview with Father George Maximoff, who's probably the most important and famous alive Orthodox missionary there is, and a whole video on the African Exarchate. And so all these arguments over it, and here you have someone who's intertwined with this, had an interview on this channel, who was really good. A great video on the atonement, talking about original sin, the Orthodox doctrine of atonement on the dogmatic documents. This was especially dear to my heart because we have a lot of people that just don't know, like Eric Ybarra, or feed on the ignorance in order to try to expound certain ideas about this. And we took the time to very carefully go through this. A video on Photius failed ecumenist, where have you heard that before? About the attempted unions with the Armenians in the 9th century. Again, a kind of boutique topic, but again, something that no one else is talking about. We had first century Trinitarianism and Christology, where we showed that the Nicene doctrine and the Constantinopolitan doctrine is found in first and second century documents, including Jewish documents. So stuff you don't see anywhere else. And I think is much more profitable in apologetics than the whatever, newest wind of doctrine and drama and stuff that really isn't good for your soul. So like and subscribe to this channel, support this channel. That'd be very appreciated. And there we go. So I will end this show, as in all of them, by quoting Jesus Rock. Fight to death for the truth. The Lord God will fight for you. God bless you. Have a great day.